Welcome to State of Ed, a podcast about education inside the classroom and out. My name is Marc.
And I'm Nick Simone.
How you doing today, Nick?
Doing really well. Yourself?
I can't complain. Thank you very much. Very happy to have a very special guest with us. Tom Ehlers, who is the founder and owner of Method Test Prep, is with us. Tom, thanks so much for being here.
Happy to be here.
And this is one of the rare opportunities that we get to actually sit down face to face and have a podcast versus Skype or Google Hangout. So it's nice to actually be in the same physical space. So why don't you just start right off the bat and help our listeners. There are a lot of people who maybe don't understand the difference between the ACT and the SAT. Can you just give us a little tutorial on the differences between the two exams?
Sure. Well, I think it's interesting. The fact is that 70% of students will score about the same on the SAT and the ACT. So what I tell parents and students and educators is it's frustrating to say to a family, you really should take both the SAT and the ACT, knowing that 70% of school students are going to score about the same. But for those 30% of students who score much higher on one or the other, it sure would stink to only take one of the two exams. So the two exams are very similar grammar questions tested, very similar reading comprehension, most of the same math concepts. So the content is very similar, but the formats are different. And some students are going to score a little better on one format, and some students are going to score a little better on the other format. I guess one fact that I like to share with people, just to sort of crystallize the differences, is on the ACT, 75% of the ACT essentially comes down to your verbal ability. And that's because on the ACT, there are 4 sections, not including the optional essay. The 4 sections are English, math, reading, and science. And science is essentially reading comprehension. They're not testing you on your science knowledge. They're testing you on, they're going to give you a table or a graph or a chart, and you have to pull information off that table, graph, or chart. So for kids who are more comfortable with verbal than they are with math, they might feel more comfortable with the ACT. I just tell parents that colleges are giving you 2 chances to be successful. You might as well take advantage of both chances. It would be like being given 2 free throws in a basketball game and saying, no, I'll just take the one. Right? That's absurd. It's also absurd to only take the SAT or the ACT. Some people try to get into the whole prediction game of which test you're going to do better on. But I say to families, take each test once and see which one you score better on.
Now, did you take both tests in high school?
I actually didn't. I only took the SAT. Now, through my company, many of us take the SAT and ACT regularly. So I have taken both the SAT and ACT recently, and people say, how can you take the SAT? And I say, the College Board will take anybody's money.
Okay.
You know, my money is green, they took it. So
Is there a reason? I'm like you, growing up on Long Island, I only took the SAT as well. So is there a reason why the ACT is seen more as like a Midwestern test, or is that even true? I just felt like that's how it was interpreted to me in high school.
yes, and that's because traditionally it was. The ACT was a test that you took in the middle of the country, and the SAT was a test you took on both coasts. But more and more people started to realize, like, you might as well take both tests because every college in the country will accept either test. And I mean, there's a lot that's happened between the ACT and College Board, a lot of jockeying for position, so to speak. But now the ACT is the exit exam in, I think it's 17 different states.
Oh, wow.
So if you go to high school in those states, you're taking the ACT as your exit exam. But now the SAT is sort of struck back. Now the SAT is the exit exam in a couple of states. So,
really?
And states are kind of flipping back and forth. I think there's a lot of sort of backroom politicking going on.
Just a note to anybody who wants to ever do a podcast, never do it on the day of junior high sports in your school and while you're on the anywhere near the gym. So my apologies to the hearing bouncing balls in the background.
And my experience, I've noticed a lot more kids are taking the ACT. A lot more kids are taking both now in my school.
Yep.
I think I don't remember that early on in my career.
Yeah, well, here on Long Island, it's been very significant as far as number of test takers. I hear schools here on Long Island, where used to be 20 kids took the ACT, now it's 200.
Yeah.
So you're talking about that kind of sort of land shift, so to
Well,
speak.
competition is good. So what is it that your company actually does?
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting because I was a fifth grade teacher on Long Island, and my parents spent their whole careers teaching in a high school, and they said, Tom, you ought to tutor for the SAT. You did well in the SAT. We have a lot of kids here not scoring well. So I started tutoring, and I started to realize these kids were going into the test with no tricks, no strategies, no techniques, no anything. So I started tutoring all day, every day. I really enjoyed it because I could see what an impact I was making on the kids. And, I'm teaching fifth grade during the day. The fifth graders are trying to drive me crazy.
Wow.
And they're good at it.
Just trying or succeeding?
Yeah. They were succeeding. And then in the afternoon, evenings, the students saying thank you, the parents saying thank you, then the parents saying, would you like a chicken cutlet Parmesan hero? Would you like a ice cream sundae? And I said, I'm going to just do this all day, every day, because I felt like I was actually teaching. So it just started out as me, teaching, tutoring, and then slowly it built up. And then we created a web-based program so that any student with a little bit of motivation and discipline can learn all the tricks and strategies and techniques. So we have a web-based platform that students, it's just a checklist kids follow. And then we still do a lot of tutoring as well.
How did you make the jump from knowing about things in the classroom and educationally to the technology piece and bridging that gap?
Yeah, it was simple. My best friend growing up was a computer science major.
That'll help.
Yeah, so he did the programming and I did the content.
How long did it take to go from being your individual private tutor to having the technological level?
Probably 6 or 7 years, and then we had a web-based product, and the tough part, of course, is that we thought that we were going to be very successful selling it to families, but families really just want a tutor. They want the tutor to be responsible, so to speak, in a lot of cases. And so we ended up having more success selling the web-based program to schools.
Okay.
And this way, a school can say to the community, we are paying for every student here to have access to SAT and ACT prep. So regardless of your financial situation, we're providing everybody with access. And of course, that's very appealing to me because I want every kid to have the same fair shot. Yeah. We put every trick, every strategy on the program. So if you have the motivation, if you have the discipline, you can learn everything you need to learn on the program.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great, with the schools purchasing it, it's a great opportunity because you do hear people's criticism that the standardized tests are not, fair to low-income students who don't have the opportunity to get the test prep. This is an opportunity for them in any school district to have that. So
Yeah.
It's a great.
And it's just like technology changing so many facets of life that now, now we have the ability to give every student the same sort of fair shot.
And so you obviously have to keep up to date with all the changes on the exam.
Yeah.
Is that difficult on the technological end of it to keep up with it? In other words, the exam changes, now changing your web program, is that difficult or?
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay, at least you're honest.
Yeah. So we've spent the last 2 years sort of overhauling first our SAT program to respond to the changes, and then the ACT takes sort of a different approach. They change sort of incrementally, so not with big announcements like the SAT.
Okay.
Yes. So the ACT is quietly changing every year, so we have to adapt our material to that.
To what extent is Common Core infiltrating, for lack of a better word, the SAT and the ACT?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting question because most people are not aware of this. David Coleman, who was one of the architects of the Common Core, he is now the president of the College Board. Mm-hmm. And so his goal is that the SAT be 100% aligned with the Common Core curriculum, which in one sense is a good thing because that means as kids go through their high school program, everything they're learning in high school is what they're going to be tested on the SAT. So one simple example, algebra is now the focus of the SAT. 70% of the math on the SAT is algebra. Only 30% is geometry. Used to be more like a 50-50 split. And that's this idea that algebra really is the key to college success. And so anyway, when you talk about infiltrating, the Common Core has infiltrated the College Board at the highest level. And again, the other interesting thing, of course, is that the SAT has changed to be more like the ACT. So the ACT was taking market share from the SAT. So the ACT, so many folks believe that one of the reasons that the College Board decided to overhaul the SAT was to, kind of, if you can't beat them, join them. So the two exams are very similar.
If you were advising an auditorium full of guidance counselors, high school guidance counselors, what kind of strategies would you offer them to relate to their students in terms of when to take the SAT, when to take the ACT? I know you said that it's best to take both, and you gave the free throw analogy. So when is the best time to take either one, and what should you do then with the feedback that you get from the exam?
Yeah, so first of all, the entire country is used to the PSAT, and PSAT was designed to be taken in the fall of junior year. More and more it's taken by 10th graders, and that's fine, but it's really designed as an 11th grade test. So the best time to take the PSAT is junior year, and you get that feedback December. And then, unfortunately, no one's surprised here that most kids do nothing with that feedback. But they give you the questions, they show you which questions you got right and wrong. If you use that feedback, you can intelligently prepare. The shame is that on the SAT and on the ACT, you can actually have the entire test sent back to you. You have to pay an additional fee. Now, if you get a fee waiver on the SAT or ACT, which a lot of families qualify for fee waivers, you actually get a fee waiver on this service, but they'll send the whole test back to you so you can see what you're doing right and wrong. The tragedy to me is that 99% of families and 99% of schools and counselors are not really aware of these services. So you guys can imagine it like this. A student is taking the SAT or ACT. They're getting a score that they're not completely satisfied with. Nobody's telling them what they did wrong. And then somebody's saying, go take that exam again. Right? That's literally the definition of insanity, right? And it's no wonder kids are so demoralized. None of us would want to take a 5-hour exam, not know what we did wrong, and then go take it again, right? But the good news is there's a better way. So the best time to take the ACT junior year is December, because that is one of 3 exams throughout the year where you can actually have the entire test sent back to you and you can see what you're doing wrong. And then for the SAT, for the last 18 years, I've been saying, take the January SAT, because you can order the service, you can see what you're doing wrong. Both the organizations get the test back about a month and a half later. So a month and a half after you take the test, you can see what you're doing wrong. And then you can use that to score higher the next time. I know there's another long answer to a short question, Marc. December for the ACT. December for the ACT and January for the SAT. And then you can simply Google your 2 scores. You can compare them. You can see which one you did better on. And that would be the exam to focus on moving forward.
So let's take a hypothetical student who might be a teenager living in my house and who ought to be listening to this podcast and not watching Grey's Anatomy. When she gets the exam back, how can she then turn to your method test program, online and utilize that to help herself?
Sure. So a student would see a question that they got wrong. Let's use an example that they got an exponents question wrong. Then they can go to our exponents lesson. All of our lessons are less than 5 minutes long. So, we understand that people don't necessarily have time or want to listen to a half an hour lesson. So they listen to a 3-4 minute lesson, and then they take a quiz, because the nice thing about these exams, they are the most repetitive tests in the world. They literally test kids on the same freaking thing every time, and so you can see the types of questions that they're going to ask you. You can practice them on our program. And then when you take the test again, you're going to see very similar questions. So basically, what I tell kids is when you get your service back, and again, for the PSAT, comes back automatically. Every student who takes the PSAT gets this. Open it up. They tell you the difficulty level of each question. Look for the easiest ones you got wrong. And then you can see the type of concept that is. And then you can go on our program and watch that video. Yeah.
So that's the basis of your program, is that you have a short instructional video for a variety of topics,
Correct.
and then practice questions after they watch. And they can do it at their own pace.
Yep, they can do it at their own pace. Yep, and we do have a diagnostic for each exam.
Okay.
So you can take a short diagnostic at the beginning, and then you can take a couple full-length exams at the end. And in between is what you just said, Nick, is short instructional videos and audio lessons, and then practice sets of questions.
That's great.
It's like their own private flipped classroom.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. And how long have you had the company with the technological level of it?
Yeah, so it's been 15 years now.
years.
So it's been a long time, and we've learned how to engage with schools. Schools like any other large organization. There are tricks or techniques to be more helpful to a school that you learn over time.
Geographically, what parts of the country are you in?
We have schools in all 50 states.
Wow.
Yeah, and we have some international schools as well.
Oh, great.
That's amazing. With all of those schools, you must have an incredible wealth of data from all the practice exams and practice questions that kids are taking. So, what are some of the areas of greatest success and the areas of greatest weakness on behalf of American students?
Yeah, it's a great question.
If you could, if it's not a
No, it's a great question.
top secret question.
Yeah, no, it's not a top secret question. I mean, there's a couple of different ways I could answer it, but one, I think the most important thing to me is that there's still this stigma that kids can't learn online, and it's very frustrating, and it's very it's self-defeating, I guess maybe is a phrase that many parents will say to us, hey, listen, the web-based program sounds great, but my kid can't learn online. And I just,
That's crazy.
It's crazy.
We all learn online. I mean, anytime I need to do something now, whether it's fix the VCR, not VCR, the DVR, excuse me, or something with the phone, or something with the microwave. I mean, literally anything that I need to do or learn how to do to fix it or to investigate, I do it all online. I don't take out a manual anymore and figure out what's wrong with the dishwasher. That's I'm sorry.
It's insanity, and I guess old habits die hard, and we do teach classes at high schools, and that's the way it's been done for the last 50 years. So the parent says, well, I want to send my son or my daughter to your class at the local high school. And I say, sure, but just because you're sending your son or daughter to my class doesn't mean they're going to pay attention. One thing that, not to go on too much of a digression here, but the program Coursera, have you guys heard of Coursera?
Yes, I haven't.
Yeah, it's great.
So it's free online classes from every leading university anyone's ever heard of. So
okay, yeah.
Yeah, you
yeah,
can.
Harvard, Princeton, Duke, Michigan, you name it. And so anybody can jump on and take a class for free. And I've taken a bunch of these classes, and I can't believe how much I'm learning. And so one thing I say to parents is, well, if you say your kid can't learn online, today is the day they should start learning online. Because if you can learn online, you're at a massive advantage. Like you say, Mark, it's how we all learn. So anyway, one way to answer your question is, unfortunately, people are just not using the program enough. Now, those who are using the program, we have a neat feature that shows, we call it the method test prep norm. And what it shows is what percentage of kids are answering that type of question correctly. So if it's a proportions question, it's getting answered correctly 60% of the time. So what's nice is a student can see their percentages and say, okay, in these areas I'm above average, in these areas I'm below average, compared to the norms. The other way I would answer it is that this is nothing new or different, is that there are a lot of basic skills that students are lacking in. And this is something that Sal Khan has said at different education conferences, that, the way we do education is crazy. We give kids a set amount of time to learn something. Some kids get a 90, some kids get a 70, some kids get a 50.
And then it's over.
Then the next week we start on the next skill, which a lot of times builds on the previous skill. So it's just not a way to, it's just not an intelligent design. And so we see that a lot now with kids preparing for the SAT and ACT, is that they're trying to learn, a statistics question or a high level reading comprehension question, but they don't have some of the basics.
Have you noticed a greater weakness with the math skills lately? Like my criticism has been that I don't know why they would start a new way of teaching math midstream for kids in the middle. Like if they wanted to introduce the Common Core math standards, agree or disagree, it should have started with a kindergarten group.
Yeah.
And then worked. So I just know from my perspective, my students, and I teach AP students, a lot of them are really struggling more with math than they ever have.
And your cohort this year is the group, because that's
your
my
daughter. Yeah.
daughter's group.
So there's
When it started.
so I don't know if you've noticed that the math has been even more troubling for your clients or students you've worked with recently, or
Well, the challenge for us is both the SAT and ACT, the math has gotten more difficult. So my point is that it's a moving target for us, right? So it's hard for me to say like the kids are struggling more because there's another variable that's been introduced, which is the math has gotten more rigorous.
Okay.
So, I mean, to answer your question, Nick, yes, the kids are struggling mightily on this high level math. I think both the SAT and ACT knew the kids were going to struggle mightily. In some cases, the curve has gotten more generous. So it's kind of like tougher exam, more generous curve. But to answer your question, I mean, yes, kids are struggling with a lot of the material.
yeah, and you bring that up, and I remember that early in my teaching career, there was this talk that the SAT curve changed from when we were in high school. Is that true that they did actually, an 1100 in, 1980 was now a 1200 or something like that?
I wouldn't. There are so many myths and rumors around the SAT and ACT, and
That's what I wasn't sure.
We want to know if we're smarter than we think we are. That's what we're really asking.
Well, I didn't get 1100. I did better than that. So.
Show up.
There's so much high level, statistics that have gone on throughout the years, and then of course there was the 1600 to 2400 and back to 1600. I mean, one thing that is true is that what it's looking like right now is they have changed the curve in the sense that, and maybe this will make Nick happy, that an 1100 back in the day, now a school wants to see like an 1180.
Yeah.
So the scoring, it's at least at this moment, and it's a work in progress. Everybody admits that. Colleges admit that their scale is going to change as they get more data. The College Board is still working out their scale. But right now, that 1100 now needs to be, say, an 1180 for the colleges to see it on equal footing.
So in other words, I couldn't get into the school that I wanted to. So are you seeing, on Long Island, we've had a tremendous pushback on state assessments from 3rd grade through 8th grade. Are you seeing any pushback on SAT and ACT as well, now that people have almost, at least on Long Island and in many parts of New York, kind of developed the mindset that they do not believe or support the big test anymore?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think that since I've been doing this, people can't stand the SAT and ACT. People just wish it would go away. I mean, I was actually presenting to a group of guidance counselors today, and one of the guidance counselors just had a sour look on her face the entire time I was talking, and she finally said, I couldn't stand this test back when I took it, and it's just making me nervous thinking about it. So there's always been, such a negative feeling toward these tests, but I think that people recognize that a lot of colleges, they just have no other way to compare students. And so, but it is an interesting question because I think a lot of these parents who have been so vocal against standardized tests at the young grades. I don't know that all of them have gotten to the 10th and 11th grade, 12th grade years.
Right.
What I always say is, hey, I'm not a fan of standardized tests, but at some point there has to be a test. And to me, both the SAT and the ACT, they do a reasonably good job of measuring things that skills that you need to have if you're going to be successful in college or if you're going to be successful just with the rest of your life, basic skills that you need to have. So I would like to see the SAT and the ACT become the exit exam, maybe in more places. And this way we could eliminate some of the other tests. And certainly there are too many tests at the younger grades. I believe that. I feel like most people can sort of agree on that, believe that. But then when you get to the high school level, people kind of understand that at some point you have to have a measurement.
And we've talked about it several times. There's nothing wrong with giving kids tests. It's what you use the test for.
Right.
So there's nothing wrong with telling third graders to come into school one day, all right, we're just going to take a test today. But to spend 6 months scaring these kids about the test because a teacher thinks that his or her career depends on it, that's the problem. I mean, you need evaluation. You need to know what level the students are at. And we always did that. When we were in school, we walked into school and we all took a California Achievement Test or an Iowa test. But I don't have any memory of my teacher ever telling me about the test.
Right.
Walked in.
You get the envelope one day, and you bring it home. And
if you did well, your parents were proud. They said you were in the X percentile. And if they didn't, you just disregarded it. And now we've made the test a bigger monster. Kids with, anxiety and nerves about it and going to morning programs and afternoon programs because they're not going to do well on it. And then I think, like I said, now when they get to high school, when the tests really are much more valuable, they get the pushback. And that's a problem. But that was not a question. That was just me ranting.
In your opinion, what does the future of the SAT and the ACT look like?
So now that I've been doing this 18 years, the changes seem minor to me compared to it's really the same as it was 18 years ago, which is you've got to take at least one of them. And if you're smart, you probably want to take both of them. And it's going to make a difference as far as where you get accepted. It's going to make a difference as far as scholarship and merit aid and sometimes financial aid. I mean, right, many times we have students who say, we've already been accepted to college X, but the college has told us if we score 50 points higher, we're eligible for an extra $4,000 a year, right? That's a standard way that colleges divvy out their merit money. So when you ask me about the future of the SAT and ACT, I don't think it's going to change much. I think that it's too significant a piece of the puzzle. College admissions offices, they don't want to overhaul what they're doing. I think that higher education, the whole college and university system in the United States may go through some significant changes, but ultimately, a lot of the system is still going to stay the same.
Do you foresee that the ACT and the SAT will be given strictly on computers at some point in the next few years, since they seem to be wanting to move in that direction, at least in New York State, with a lot of the other testing?
Yeah, so the ACT has started to experiment with that, and more kids are taking the test on computers. The big issue is just number of devices, and so we're just not there yet from a technological standpoint. And I mean, there's actually a bigger issue going on, which is it's a pain in the butt for schools to administer the SAT and ACT. It's really, I mean, it's a necessary evil. They don't love doing it. So now, if the SAT were to move online, now a school needs to have 300 devices ready to go. So
and the bandwidth to
bandwidth.
God forbid that goes down in the middle of that'd be a national crisis. We're so happy to have this chance to sit down with you and get all this really important information. And to be honest, before I was kind of experiencing this with my own my older child. I really just had whatever kind of antiquated understanding of the ACT and the SAT because it just didn't fall directly into the realm of what I did, and I tried to, I guess, stay tangentially connected to it, but never really had the opportunity to hear about these kinds of strategies and so on that you're offering. And I think it's just so worthwhile for people to have this information, because if you're armed with this information, then you really are setting yourself up for greater levels of success.
Yeah, well, if I would like to say, guys, that the number one thing that I want people to take away from the SAT and the ACT is that these are not IQ tests. These are not tests that you can't improve on. I always make the comment that the SAT is a test of how many SAT questions you've practiced. The ACT is a test of how many ACT questions you've practiced. Kids can do better. For 18 years, people will say to me, my son or my daughter is not a good test taker. And I ask them, well, how much has your son or daughter practiced? They'll say, well, they did the question of the day.
Right.
And I say, well, that's really not enough practice. And I'll say, well, how hard does your son or daughter work in school? And they say, tremendously hard. They're up until 11:30 every night doing homework. And I say, well, that's why they're so successful in school, right? Because the most common comment we get is, our child does great in school, but doesn't do well in these tests. Yeah, because your son or your daughter is putting in 4 hours a night on homework. So that's why they're doing well, but they're not really studying for the SAT or ACT. And for better or for worse, the SAT or the ACT can be its own separate language. So, and I can't help myself, guys, because I'm such a dork. But if I could just share one simple example, the ACT loves testing kids on redundancy, right? Because kids, when they write, they put in too many extra words because their teacher told them to do 3 pages and they're trying to fill up 3 pages. So the ACT will ask kids questions like, the old elderly man went to the store. And I'm simplifying a little bit, but 3 of the answer choices will say something like the old elderly man. And then one choice will just say the elderly man. And that's the right answer. And so they're just testing kids on, can you recognize redundancy or an unnecessary word? And when I ask kids why they chose an answer that maybe was incorrect on that question, they'll say, oh, because I thought a word was spelled wrong. And I say, they don't even test you on spelling on the ACT. So that's just, to me, a really good example of that parent or that child might say, I'm a bad test taker. You're not a bad test taker. You didn't know what was even you were going to be tested on. You don't even know what to look for. And then the thing is, as crazy as that example sounds, consider that there are 4 of those questions on every single ACT. So if you know that one concept, you now just got 4 more questions correct. Right. Not because you're a good test taker. It's because somebody told you to look out for redundancy. Mm-hmm. And that makes a massive difference on your score. And that's one of 50 examples. So again, there had been this myth and this rumor that have been out there for 100 years that these are IQ tests, and they're not. They're tests that you can prepare for. They're repetitive. So, I say to people, like, you can do something about this. You need to put in a little bit of work.
Well, maybe I'll just end by saying maybe schools have to recognize that kids might need more time to be able to put the effort into the SATs, because you always hear about the stress of junior year.
Right. Are we at exactly the wrong time?
Are we, because like one of the things I always encounter is many of the kids take the SAT in May. And what else is May? Their AP exams and the prom. And it is an unbelievably stressful time. But over the course of the year, junior year, maybe schools need to consider what their homework policies are, and can we provide kids with more of an opportunity to use your program so they can actually practice the skills, because whether we like it or not, like you said, it's a reality. These tests are important to them.
Yeah.
But this was a great conversation, and can't tell you how much we enjoyed it and loved listening to you. All the people I feel bad for is, are your kids going to be expected to get 1600s? Anything less, and they're paying for college on their own? So,
I always tell people, my second graders, I have not started test prep with them.
Okay.
We'll start that next year.
So we're going to put a link to Method Test Prep on our website, and if you would like to follow us or find us online, it's stateofedpodcast.com. And you can also email us to ask a question, ask@stateofedpodcast.com, or you can find us on Twitter @SOE Podcast, or simply go to the iTunes store and search for us, State of Ed Podcast, and please subscribe if you find us. and come back and listen to some episodes as we move along into this school year. So again, Tom, thank you so much. It was really a pleasure to have you here, and I know I definitely learned a lot, and just a really great talk, and it was a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, my pleasure, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.